Hi guys and welcome back to our channel. In this video we are going to talk about the form IMM1344, that is the application to sponsor, sponsorship agreement and undertaking. Now we are going to talk about who the form is for, how the form needs to be filled in both in a paper-based application and in an online application. And along the way I am going to point out the key things that you need to keep in mind while you are filling up this form, and each section I have placed in the time cards on this video. So if you are here looking for answers for specific section, you might want to just jump onto that section, and in case if you feel that something is missed out, you may put down your questions in the comments below and I will try to answer them as quickly as possible. So without wasting any further time, let's jump right in. So the first things first, how do you know that this is the form that you need to fill in and who is it for? In our previous videos, we have talked about from where can you download all the forms that are relevant to your application and the mode for which you are applying. So for example, if you are applying inland application, what are the forms that are applicable? And if you are applying an outland application, what are the forms applicable then? If you have not watched those videos and if you do not have an idea what exactly I am talking about, then you might probably want to jump to that video. Link is somewhere on the above, or you can also find it in the description box below. In one of those videos, we have talked about something called a checklist. Now, checklist is, as I like to say, is the backbone of the entire application. And checklist tells you what are the forms that are applicable to you. If you refer to the checklist, that is also called IMM5533, you will find that under part A, that is the forms required, there is a section for sponsor which says application to sponsor, sponsorship agreement and undertaking IMM1344 is required. Now, it also says one important instruction that this form must be signed by both you, that is the sponsor, and the person you are sponsoring, that is the principal applicant. Now, this is a key piece of concern, especially when you're submitting in an online application, and we are going to talk about that in the later part of the video. Now, this is the place where you get to know that this is the form that needs to be filled in by the sponsor and needs to be signed by both the sponsor and the principal applicant. Also on the website, when you're going to download the application package from where you actually got your checklist, it will list out that the forms that is required for the sponsor to fill out is IMM1344 along with IMM5532, IMM5476 if applicable. We are going to cover these forms as well in the upcoming video, so if you are not subscribed, you can subscribe to the channel and you will be notified when the videos come out. Now let's first talk about what exactly this form IMM1344 is. As the name suggests, is an application to sponsor. Now this sponsorship form is actually not just something that is going to be used if you're sponsoring your spouse. It is also going to be used if you're sponsoring any other relative that is applicable. For example, let's say you are sponsoring your parents, your grandparents or other relatives, if applicable according to which program you're applying for. This is the same form that will be used even in those cases. So in this video, the context we are going to keep it as like you are sponsoring your spouse and if applicable, your dependent children. So in this form, the person who is sponsoring is giving an undertaking that whatever is the requirements for someone to sponsor a particular individual is something that sponsor is ready to comply with. So there are some obligations that the sponsor has to fulfill. We are going to talk about that in the later part of the video, so what those obligations are, and those are very clearly listed out in this form. But for the sake of understanding, it is a simple form which is going to identify the sponsor and who the person is sponsoring. Now, if there is anything missing or anything not in the right place in this form, then IRCC will not be able to identify who is the sponsor. Now, this is why this particular form becomes really crucial. So first, let me download this form and we are going to fill this up first in the system. Then we are going to talk about how this needs to be submitted if you're doing a paper-based application and how it needs to be submitted if you're doing an online mode of application. Having downloaded this form, let's go question by question and see what are the fields that are applicable and what is the information that is requested. So right when you open the form, the first thing that you notice is there is a validate button right in the middle, and this button, as the name indicates, is going to validate if all the information that is filled in is in the right format and as required. We are going to talk about that in the later section of the video when we are done with the filling of the form. But for now, let's jump to the first question. If you are found ineligible to sponsor, indicate whether you want to withdraw your sponsorship or proceed with this application. So when we were doing our application, even we were not sure what to fill in for this. So we reached out to different people in the groups and we also read through a lot of posts on various forums. And we finally learned that if you select withdraw your sponsorship application, it is just going to assume that if this application is not meeting the criteria for the program for which you applied for, your fees will be refunded back. That is, the processing fees will be refunded. But if you select that proceed with the application, it simply means that even if your application gets rejected at any point in time, you will not be refunded the processing fee. So the best response in this case would be you select withdraw your sponsorship application and all processing fee will be refunded. The next question, language preference for correspondence. Now here again we are still talking about everything related to the sponsor, and the list of available options are English and French. So if you're comfortable with English as the language of correspondence, you will select English, or you can also select French. In my case, we selected English. Now, the third question, is there a co-signer on this application? And there is very contradicting information that is available in the complete guide that you refer and in this form. So for example, it says the co-signer must be the spouse or common law partner of the spouse. But that is not true, because the program for which you are applying, the rules of that program takes the highest precedence. In this case, you are applying for sponsoring your spouse. Now, if you download the complete guide for the program Sponsor Your Spouse, you will have a clear instruction that you have to ignore this section if you're sponsoring your spouse. So that takes the highest precedence. So in this case, the answer is going to be no. That is, you as an individual or you as a sponsor is the only person who is sponsoring, and there is no co-signer. As I said in the earlier section of the video, this is the form that is going to be also used for different sponsorship programs like sponsoring your parents, sponsoring your grandparents and other relatives. In that case, if you're sponsoring your parents or grandparents, your spouse can become a co-signer. That is where you are going to provide an undertaking that you and your spouse are financially capable enough to take care of your parents or grandparents and or other relatives that you're applying for. So in this case, the answer is going to be no, because you're sponsoring your spouse. So the person you are sponsoring, principal applicant. In this case, if you are having multiple applicants, that your spouse and for let's say your children, then you are still going to enter information about your spouse. So you are going to write person you are sponsoring, that is the principal applicant. I'm going to write a dummy name, Tark Sansa. Date of birth is 1985 in the month of June, 1st of June. So as I said in this video, the context is spousal sponsorship. Here you can select your spouse, or if you are in a conjugal relationship, you can select conjugal partner, or you can also select a common law partner. You have options like common in law partner living in Canada, conjugal partner living outside Canada, or you can select spouse living in Canada if it is an inland application, and spouse living outside Canada. So in our case, my wife was living in India, so we selected spouse living outside Canada. The key thing to note here is, if your spouse is living with you in Canada, but you still want to apply as an outland application, you will still select spouse living outside Canada, though they are still living with you. If some of you would want to know why you would do that your spouse is living with you, but you are still applying for an outland application, it is a common observation that the outland application gets processed relatively quicker than the inland application. So that's why some individuals like to select spouse living outside of Canada, though they are living with them in the country. It is all legal. It's just that if you are applying for this program, your spouse who is living with you in Canada will not be able to get an open work permit. That is the permit that allows them to work in the country. So if that is not a concern, probably that is also a program that you can go for. In the context of this video, keeping the case simple, we are selecting spouse living outside of Canada. Now here you will observe that in this form, based on some of your responses, the other fields gets grayed out. So like we just observed, based on the response that we provided in question 6, the sections like B and C gets grayed out. So there is no response that we need to provide. If you had selected conjugal partner or common law partner, then this particular section of C would be applicable. Now why that is key observation is that in those gray fields, you will not be able to type in anything. Like for example, it is said that in most of the forms, you should not leave any field blank. But in this form, the system will not even let you write NA at all. So it's okay if you're just going to print it out as is without writing NA, you're still good to go ahead and submit this form in the application. Now this section is for the sponsor's personal details. We are just going to write that dummy names. Have you ever used any other names? Just select no and the field gets grayed out. Gender, date of birth is let's say 1985, June 1st. Place of birth, here we will write, let's say Geoffrey was born in India. We will just write basic information. Next question is status in Canada. Now this is the sponsor status. Now you can sponsor your spouse only if you are a permanent resident or you are a Canadian citizen. So in this case, I'm going to select permanent resident. The next question is, if you are a permanent resident or a naturalized Canadian citizen, provide the following information. Date on which you obtained this status. Now this is the date when you actually became a permanent resident. If you have forgotten what date it was, you have two ways of finding that. First, you can check on the back of the PR card. On there it will tell you the date on which you did your landing. So that's the landing date, the first time when you came to the country as a permanent resident. Or you can go back and see the date that was stamped by the immigration officer that had met you at the airport. when you came for the first time as a permanent resident. The next is UCI. Now this is Unique Client Identifier. This is something that you will definitely have if you became a permanent resident at some point in time. If you do not remember your UCI number, you can go back to your CIC account when you had actually received your PR status. In that account, you will see your UCI number. It is a 10-digit number. So you can just paste that 10-digit number in here. So here we are going to write just 1000. So it's a 10-digit number that you can write. The next part, full name at the time you became your permanent resident. Since you have selected that you were not known by any other name, you are going to select that is my full name. So this section becomes grayed out. So the next question, your current marital status. Now since we are applying for my spouse who is living in Canada, I'm just going to select married. Provide the date on which you were married or entered into the common law relationship. Now the date when actually you got married. Next, provide the name of your current spouse, because here it is assumed that if you have a previous relationship, you are going to disclose that information as well. Have you been previously married? No. But if you were, then you are going to provide that information here. Now the information that you're providing in these forms has to corroborate with the entire application that you're providing. So if you had a previous relationship, you will have to disclose that in here and also in the different forms that are there in the application package. The next section is current mailing address. Now, if you are living in a place which is just for a temporary accommodation and you would probably be changing to a place which is more permanent, then you can provide that information for all your correspondence. You still have an option of writing a different residential address. So that is what you are going to do. But if you're providing a residential address, you cannot have a PO box number. And you will see that if you have selected that's a residential address, then system will not allow you to have a PO box number. So in this case, if I write just NA for example, residential address is same as the mailing address. The moment you select yes, system is going to give you this pop-up. Since your residential address is a mailing address, it cannot have a PO box number. So you will have to remove a PO box number from there. So what we are going to do here is, if you do not want to leave this field blank, once you're going to print this form, you can manually write NA and then submit it with the application. Is there any other alternate telephone number? You can just select other and probably you can give your spouse's telephone number, even that is fine. And we write country code as India. There is no need to write that +91 because the system will anyways give you a pop-up that plus is not accepted. So you can just write 91 and you can write that 5-digit number. Next, fax. So you can write not applicable once you print it manually. Now next is email address. Now this is a crucial part of the form. All important communications from IRCC will be directed to this particular email address. So whenever there is a message that is dropped in your CIC account, you will get notified on this email address. So make sure that this particular email address does not have a lot of spam messages coming in so that you do not miss out on any information. Or the better recommended approach would be create a different email address, and that email address is something that you can enter it here. And make sure that you are checking that email address every single day for any kind of updates from IRCC. Moving to the next section, Sponsors Residency Declaration. Now this question says, are you a Canadian citizen living exclusively outside Canada? Now it is really important that you provide the right response to this particular section. If you are a Canadian citizen not living inside Canada but you are living outside, you have to show in your file that you have all plans to come back to the country once your application is processed. Now this is not an option for a permanent resident because permanent resident has to apply if they are inside the country and not outside. So if you are saying that you are living outside Canada and you have also provided justification that you are going to come back to the country, you have to provide response to the next question, which asks you which is the place where you would want to stay after you come back to the country. It could be a Canadian province other than Quebec, or it will be Quebec. So in this case, we are just going to select that the sponsor lives inside Canada. Let's move to the next section, which says Sponsors Eligibility Assessment. There are a couple of questions that the sponsor will be asked, and sponsor is going to provide responses to those questions. Based on the responses provided, the eligibility of the sponsor is going to be identified. Make sure that you're not doing any kind of misrepresentation here, and the information that you're providing is most truthful to the best of your knowledge. And the same is already indicated in this particular form. If you answer no to any of the questions from 1 to 4, you are ineligible to sponsor. Of course, you would not want to waste your money and spend it down the drain if you are anyways not eligible to sponsor, and that is something that you know before you even get started with the application. So let's go and see what those questions are. Are you 18 years of age or older? So you select yes. Are you Canadian citizen or permanent resident? You select yes. Are you sponsoring a member of your family class or a member of the spouse or common law partner? Then you select yes. Do you reside in Canada and in no other country? So as I said earlier, if the answer is no, but you are a Canadian citizen living exclusively outside of Canada, you may still be eligible to sponsor. But that is not an option for permanent residents. So you select yes. Now there is already a hint provided for question 5. So in the next 5 years preceding to this application, did you become a permanent resident after being sponsored? So what this question is trying to ask you is, if you were sponsored by someone else in last 5 years, then you should not submit a sponsorship application for someone else. So in this case, we are going to keep it straightforward. So we are selecting no. Moving to the next. Have you submitted a previous application in respect for which a final decision has not been made for the person being sponsored and their family members? You are going to select no. If you had selected yes, it would mean that you are submitting a duplicate application for sponsorship, and this is not going to make you eligible to sponsor because your another application is already in progress. So you should better refrain from submitting a duplicate application. And in fact, if you select yes for any of the questions from 6 to 15, you would become ineligible to sponsor, and that's what the hint very clearly states. So we just quickly jump on to the rest of the questions and provide a response. So it says, are you in receipt of a social assistance or a reason for any other than disability? So in this case, we are going to select no. So there are a couple of benefits that were provided during the COVID period. So that is the CERB. If you have received those benefits, that is not going to be counted as social assistance. You are still eligible to go ahead and sponsor your spouse. Next, are you in undischarged bankrupt or under bankruptcy? So you select no. If you had selected yes, it would mean that you are not financially stable enough to take care of your spouse during the initial days of the settlement. Next, have persons you previously sponsored or their family members received social assistance? So in this case, we select no. Did you co-sign an undertaking where the sponsored person or his or her family received social assistance? Again, no. Next, have you been ordered to leave Canada? No. Are you late in making a required payment on immigration loan or performance bond? Select no. Are you currently detained in jail? Again, no. Have you been convicted of any sexual offense? No. Are you in default of a court order? No. Next, are you the subject of an application to revoke your Canadian citizenship? Nope. Are you the subject of a report of indismissibility? Again, no. Have you been charged with any offense under Act of Parliament? Nope. So while filling up this form, if you come across that the responses in the eligibility assessment is different than what is being requested, it means that you have a complication in your case, and it is best that you reach out to a good lawyer or a certified immigration agent and get a professional advice. This was the last part wherein you are going to provide any kind of response before you finally sign the form. Now what are you signing for? You are signing for an undertaking, and that undertaking is nothing but some set of promises that you're making to the Canadian government. All the undertaking statements are provided in the rest of the form. So if you scroll down, here you will have undertaking by sponsor and co-signer if applicable. Now co-signer would have been applicable if this particular form was for your parents or grandparents. But in this case, for the spouse, it is nothing but the sponsor who is providing an undertaking. There are a lot of undertaking statements that are made in here, and you as a sponsor, when you're signing this form, it means that as a sponsor, you are going to oblige to all the undertaking. So when you come to this particular page, you will see a validate button. Now this validate button is same as what you had seen in the first page of the form. When you click on validate, and if the validation is successful, you will have a note like this. It says validation completed successfully. Please print the entire application and sign and date the last page. This page contains barcodes that facilitates data entry of your application. Another key point. If you are applying online, you do not need to sign your application form by hand. You will be asked to provide an electronic signature once you are ready to transmit your documents to CIC. Now this is where the confusion begins. That is something that we are going to talk about in the next section of this video. So after you click on validate, system is going to generate some barcodes, and that is going to be in one page of the barcode. Now if you are submitting a paper-based application, the sequence in which the barcodes have to be provided are checklist first, then the barcodes of all the other forms, and then the rest of the application. So let's click OK and move to the last page wherein it says signatures. Now this is a crucial part of the form. If you are submitting a paper-based application, it is very straightforward. It says that you have to print it, sign it, and then you are going to submit it in the application package. So the sponsor is going to provide a handwritten signature and provide a date when the signature was made. The signature of the sponsored person, that is your spouse, is going to sign in here, and he or she is going to provide the date as well. Now the middle section is not going to be applicable, so you are just going to write not applicable in this particular part and also in the date field, and you are good to go. This was for a paper-based application. However, when you are submitting it via online portal, there comes a lot of confusion. So there is a validation message which says there is no need to sign by hand. Also, there are certain part of the instruction manuals it says that you need not sign by hand. The electronic signature is good enough. But I have seen that there are people who are actually getting a lot of rejections for this. So the best way to go ahead is, if you refer to this particular screenshot on the screen, it says both the sponsor and the principal applicant have to provide a hand-drawn signature. So what you're going to do, Again, like in the paper-based application, you are going to print it out. The sponsor and the principal applicant are going to sign on the placeholder provided, also put a date on the form, and then scan it, upload it in the online portal, and then you're good to go. This is going to save you from any kind of surprises. Remember, the digital signatures can be used for various places, but if you're providing our handwritten signatures, that is always going to take the highest precedence. Also, when you're submitting this form via the online portal, you have to rename this particular file. So you can name it as the name of the principal applicant, that is the last name, hyphen the first name, hyphen IMM1344. How are you going to do that? So if you go to the CIC portal, and if you scroll to the section which says IMM1344, and you're going to upload using this particular button. So this was all about the form and how this needs to be filled in if you're submitting a paper-based application or via the online portal. So let's do a quick recap of what the form was. So we talked about who the form is for, how it needs to be filled out, and how it needs to be submitted. So the key takeaway from this video should be that this form is for the sponsor. The sponsor has to provide all the information in the manner so that the sponsor can be identified as the individual who is eligible to sponsor his or her spouse. So the UCI number has to be correct. If you are a permanent resident, you have to be inside the country. If you are a Canadian citizen living outside of the country, you have to show the intentions of coming back to the country. The mailing address has to be provided correctly. If anything goes wrong and if you're submitting a paper-based application, this is the address to which your application is going to be returned. So email address that you're providing has to be constantly monitored so that you do not miss out any critical communication from IRCC, and the responses that you're provided under the sponsorship eligibility assessment are all correct. Alright, so this brings us to the end of this video. We hope that you found this video helpful. If you did, please do not forget to subscribe to the channel, hit a like button, and let us know in the comments what you liked about this video. And if there are any questions that you would want us to answer, please put them down in the comment section below and we would be happy to help you. Thank you so much for watching, guys. Meet you in the next video. Till then, take care. Bye bye.